Welcome to That Great Business Show. I am Conall Ó Móráin, Fáilte. Uber entrepreneur Michael Smurfit once said, equity is blood, not profit, not revenue, blood. Which raises a very awkward question. If that's true, why would you ever give it away? And yet the evidence says companies that share ownership actually grow faster, keep their people longer, and generally perform better. So, naturally in Ireland, well, you've guessed it, we've made it harder to do just that, quelle surprise. My guest is Joan McCoy, Director of White Ink Architects, Honorary Professor of Practice at Queen's University Belfast, and one of the leading voices in employee ownership across these islands. A woman who didn't just talk about it, she actually did it. Now, as always, this is a real business brought to you by our pals down in Mayo. De facto shaving oil, the world's best shaving oil. Not a beard oil, it's for shaving. And unlike those pressurized cans that end up in landfill, by law, this is a no-waste alternative. defactoshave.com. Joan McCoy, be honest. Did you actually give your business away?
Well, it now belongs to the employees, but we didn't exactly give it away.
It's a very, very interesting area because there are different ways that you can rejig your business and create a new ownership. So let's just start with your one because, well, you've done it. Where did the thinking start? Where did you decide, or when did you decide that you were going to engage was it all of the employees?
Yes. Yes, our business is owned by an employee ownership trust, which is a model that's been created by the UK government, and which means that the shares of the company have been sold to the employee ownership trust, and they hold them on behalf of the employees. So whilst I'm still a director of White Ink Architects, I no longer individually own shares in it.
And to do that, now, first of all, we will get back on to the whole thing about the Republic difference with the UK, because the Republic, as I mentioned at the very beginning there, we've made an almighty mess of it, and we don't do it. We should, but we'll get back to that. Where did the original owners of White Ink get the idea, let's make this employee owned?
Well, we started to think about what was going to happen when we wanted to retire. So there were three owners, myself, Sean Tunney and Claude Maguire. And we set up the practice about 25 years ago now. And about 7 years ago, we started thinking about the next generation in the practice and how we would manage that. And obviously with three owners, we all have different priorities in life, different stages in life. And we wanted to have the conversation before it became critical, because it's harder to have those conversations when one person is ready to go and everybody else isn't. But I was aware at the time that architectural practices were announcing employee ownership in the UK. And I went, that sounds like us. Sounds like something interesting. So I did some research on how it all worked, because there was nothing in Northern Ireland to help. Nobody knew about it in Northern Ireland. I did some research. Turns out that the structure sounded like it would work very well. So the three of us sat down, we talked about it over quite a long period of time. But it was a very useful conversation, because I think one of the key things whenever you're thinking about the transition or succession planning for your business is it's very important to be mentally in the right place to hand over the reins, or for it not to be yours. And Sean always had this very nice story about White Ink being a football, because he always uses football analogies. And his analogy was that for many years in White Ink, we were inside the football because the three of us were White Ink, but we needed to get to a stage where we were outside it and kicking the football around with the rest of the team.
On the business, not in the business, yes. Isn't that what they say? So you could have, because many other practices do, professional practices, you could have just formed a wider partnership. So why did you go a different route?
Well, our business, we changed it to a company structure quite early on. Mostly because of the sort of liability issues that tie with that partnership is quite difficult. And in the UK, they have limited liability partnerships, but we felt that a company structure was better for us. So what we did consider were the obvious options. One is that you sell the practice to somebody else, or that you have a management buyout, which is mostly, I think, what are the main options for many small businesses. But looking at those options, the control is not there for you as a seller. But one of the things that really concerned us about the option of selling it to somebody else is what happens to the employees. Normally, businesses buy other businesses because they consolidate, or they see, people can lose their jobs, the culture changes, the ethos changes, and all of those people who worked with us to create the business, we would be putting their futures at risk by selling it. And we weren't comfortable with that because we had set up the practice. We were proud of what we had created, and wanted to see that legacy going forward. And management buyout used to be an option for people, but it's very difficult now. It's very difficult to raise private money to sell out. And having set up the business from scratch and seen other businesses do management buyouts, we were all very much of the opinion that the people who should run White Ink are the people with the talent to run White Ink, not the people with deep pockets. So employee ownership, it was a model that allowed us to achieve all of the things that we wanted to achieve. We were able to achieve market value for the business, although I'll talk a little bit later about the risks associated with that. The structure is in place. Nobody had to come up with any cash, so this all sounds a wee bit amazing. And we are in a buyout period, and because we decided to do it early, that meant that we can stay in the business. Sean, one of the directors, has stepped back from being a director. He's still in the business. He does what he loves doing in terms of architecture now, as opposed to worrying about the mechanics of running a business. And he contributes that way. And we just are now growing our team. So one of the things that we've been able to do is stay in the business, grow the team, so that in a couple of years' time, we can step back.
So many questions, because I want to know about, has it been more attractive to, or easier to attract people in because of it? But first thing, in the UK, you have very famously owned by the employees, John Lewis, that many, if not most people know about. And then across Europe is it an engineering practice, primarily ARUP, is not employee owned as well.
Yeah.
So there are very, very successful examples of this happening, but it's not universal. And yet there's a guy, Graham Nuttall, I've met Graham Nuttall, and he shows, his audit research says, better outcomes for profitability, for engagement, productivity, staff retention. You'd think I was doing an ad for you now, because, but you know what I mean? Why is it not caught on?
I think it's just not terribly well understood or known about. And it's one of the things that Employee Ownership Ireland are trying to do, which is we've got sort of three prongs to the organisation that I'm now a director of, because we believe in it so much, is that we're trying to educate the advisors that this is a real proven succession route that has track history and that works if it's right for you and your business. But the lawyers and accountants that people tend to go and ask about, how do I pass on my business? They don't know about employee ownership as a succession option.
I think they might know about it, but maybe there's more money in a transaction fee to flog it to somebody with a deep pocket.
Well,
your least favourite people.
Possibly is. And also I think there's a sort of perception that if you make an employee business, our business an employee-owned business, then there isn't another sale opportunity in a few years' time, which is
funny that.
True.
So go back to, because you mentioned that a lot of people, their ears would have pricked up at this one. You didn't have to raise cash for this. This is self-funding?
Yes, and it won't work for every business. It tends to work for businesses. Typically, they would need to be over 6 to 8 people. That would be the kind of smallest business that would do it, but they need to be profitable businesses.
Is that 6 to 8 or 6 to 8?
6 to 8. So that would be the very small. That's the very small end of what would work. But the business needs to be profitable. So how a typical transaction would work is that the business might have capital within the business, and then it has EBITDA and a profit valuation going forward with not guaranteed profits, because nothing's guaranteed, but a good successful business that will generate profits. And then the valuation of the business then looks at what is the current value in the business and what profit can it generate going forward. And then the business is sold to the trust, and the owners typically will get a part or a down payment based on whatever cash is in the business, or sometimes businesses will borrow some money to make that initial payment, and then the future payments then are paid out of future profits of the business.
So let's look at a case study, and we won't necessarily zero in on yours because you might know it too well. But 20 people, they want to buy an architectural practice, and we'll put a value on it of 2 million quid for simplicity's sake. They need to find 2 million quid within the business to pay the previous owners, correct?
Yes.
So the 20 people, and is in your practice, does everybody have a stake in it, like all grades?
Yeah, well, the legislation is quite strict in terms of how you sort of manage the business. So if you have an employee ownership trust, then all eligible employees have a stake in the business. The one thing that you can do as a business owner is decide how long, up to a year, that somebody has to be with you before they get that stake.
And is it an equal stake? Does everybody have the same stake?
Well, everybody is equal in the trust, where you can sort of look at, so if the business was sold, for example, it would be everybody would have an equal stake in that. But one of the big benefits of the legislation in the UK is that you can give a tax-free bonus to your staff of up to £3,500 a year. And the government has 3 different ways that you can apply that bonus. They have an idea of equality, but you can balance that bonus against. It could be a equal amount for everybody. It can be set against your percentage of your wage, or it can be to do with length of time served.
But we'll go back to my imaginary practice of 20 people. Will each and every one of those people be equal within the ownership?
Well, what happens is that a trust is created that actually holds the shares, and the trust hold the shares on behalf of the employees. So no individual employee owns a share. So it's been described a little bit like a sports club, that whilst you're a member of a sports club, you get the benefits of being a member, but you enter with nothing and you leave with nothing.
You see, that pal of yours, your colleague who talks in football terms, that's making sense. So you go and you work away, and if you are a super performer, that's reflected in your salary. Is that correct?
Yes. That would
okay.
Be, yeah.
But so when your particular practice waiting, have you found it beneficial? Have you seen any real changes? Now, I know you're going to tell me, of course, everything's rosy in the garden, but we love warts and all here. Did you notice that the greater engagement, all these things that Graham Nuttall talks about, have you seen productivity going up? Are people staying later in the office? I think you're one of those companies that sends people home early, from what I was reading about you. So all of the above. Did you notice a big difference?
Well, yeah, I think over the last 5 years that we've been employee-owned, I would say the biggest change is the energy in the business. It's gone from feeling like it was us directing things to there's sort of been a groundswell of movement, that things are moving forward. Our team, our leadership team, have really stepped up. I'll talk a little bit about the trust. We have a trust, but we also have our board that runs the company. So the company runs exactly as it ran before in terms of day-to-day operations. So it has a normal board of directors and it has its management structure. But what we do have is a trust, and the trust is made up of a director, one of the shareholders who has sold the business, who sits on the trust to protect the interests of the person who have sold the business, but they will disappear once the buyout period is over. We have an independent trustee, but we also have an employee trustee. So the purpose of the trust board is to hold the directors to account, and it's their job to ensure that the directors are running the company on behalf of the employees, that they're running a sustainable business. And one of the things that we have introduced with Rebecca, who is our trustee, she runs an employee forum. So we have representatives from all levels of the business, from our admin team, from our students, who all sit on the forum, and they talk about how to do better business. And Rebecca's come up with a lovely little statement, which is, if it's about me, you go and talk to your line manager, but if it's about we, you can bring it to the trust.
That's nice.
We have an employee ownership day, 4 days a year. So we're about to have this month's next week, and at that, then we talk about how we make the business better for everybody, and the staff come up with ideas. Rebecca sets the agenda based on what they talk about in the employee forum. So twice a year, then I'll talk to the team about financials and tell them how we're doing. Give them, not in incredible detail, but we're quite open about, are we making a profit? Are we not making a profit? Where are the challenges? And we talk about things like, how can we run the business better? How can we do less waste? How can we improve things? What do people want to do? So we've listened to the team, because a lot of our work is in the UK, for example, and we work on very large projects that are maybe between 30 and 150 million pounds. But there's been some requests for the team to work on smaller things. So, in the last 5 years, we've introduced back some smaller projects because of that feedback.
So that kind of gently, very neatly brings me to a segue about, let us say, and this can happen in any business, that there is a small cohort of people who feel that the direction is not right. Yes, they're going to have their day away once every quarter or whatever. What do you do with the rebels?
I suppose we're lucky that we haven't had any rebels.
But you've obviously been looking at many other examples before you chose to do this yourself.
Yes.
And what do they do? If somebody isn't happy, well, of course they can leave. But what else happens?
And I think everybody has the opportunity to have a voice. But certainly people have brought up ideas that we have turned down, and we've explained to people why we've turned them down. And I'd like to think that sort of open communication, that people will they'll come along with what we're all trying to do together. But I suppose, like anything, if it genuinely is not going the direction you want it to go, you have to buy in. You know, it's part of the ethos.
So what are the other benefits that you have seen? For example, this one again, attracting talent. Has that been noticeable?
I think that will become more noticeable as it becomes a little bit more mainstream. I have talked to some of our competitors in Northern Ireland because they're also looking at what they might do, and because we're 5 years ahead of any other architectural practice. As soon as White Ink directors are paid out, and we offer exactly the same package as everybody else, but we offer a bonus that is a genuine share of the profits. It's going to make White Ink an incredibly attractive, I think, to people who are looking at packages as well as looking at the kind of work that people do.
And that was one of the attractions in John Lewis, but then they ran into trading difficulties, and they hadn't paid out a bonus for 2 or 3 years. I see it's back again now that they are paying it again. So what else is any other benefits, or, please, warts and all, any other downside that you hadn't anticipated?
I think that, I suppose everybody was so enthusiastic at the start that you kind of think that everything is going to be roses, but it's like everything in life. There are going to be people who are trailblazers and 100% bought in, and then you're going to get people who just want to turn up and do their day's work and go home again, and then you get a sort of range of people in the middle. So I think it's just getting your head around that's normal and that's life. So yeah, I think that has been, as things have settled, it's, some people are really interested, some people are not. But as long as they're contributing and they're, pulling in the same direction, does that matter?
And if anybody, new people into the practice, they become members of the trust, or it's not an ownership again, it's the trust owns the company.
Yes.
So they have equal rights as well, do they?
Yes.
So John Smith or Mary Smith goes in on day one, or do they have to do a probationary period?
Well, we have a probationary period anyway, but we have tied in our, you get the benefits of being an employee owner, which effectively means that you're eligible for a bonus once you've been there for 6 months. The government allows it in the UK to be up to a year, but we have students that come in from university, part one students who do a year with us, and then they go back to university again. And it was important to us that they shared in the benefits, so we set ours at 6 months.
They were very happy with that, yeah.
I think yes. We had bonus day two weeks ago, so they were all very happy.
Now, this is not obviously tied to Northern Ireland, because you were also telling me that Prime Minister Carney in Canada has become enthused by this. They're adopting it as well.
Yes, so Canada, very, very keen on this, and up to a couple of weeks ago, they had brought in the tax benefits, or a very similar tax benefit than that was in the UK, but it was due to run out at Christmas this year, I think. And just last week, they have confirmed that it is permanent. And I think this is one of the real things for countries, as opposed, or economies, rather than just individual businesses. That employee ownership is incredibly good for economies. So Canada has really seen this as a way to keep Canadian businesses in Canada owned by Canadians. I think there's a statistic that says that one Irish business is sold to a foreign buyer every single working day. That's a lot of profits that are extracted from Ireland. And the other economic benefit is if you imagine you have a business of 100 people and everybody's getting the tax-free bonus of £3,500, that if that bonus was given to one person, they're not going to spend 350 grand in one go. But if you give 3,500 to 100 people, that money goes straight back into the economy.
I've met people who have spent 350 grand in one go, possibly even on a car.
Yes, but the benefit to the economy of 100 people spending 3,500 is huge compared to one person spending that kind of money.
Of course, yeah.
So it's good for the economy, and I think that it's one of the Northern Ireland government, actually, the Assembly has got very much behind this, and they're actually supporting Employee Ownership Ireland to provide feasibility studies for people looking at succession to consider employee ownership as an option.
What about cost to create the structure? Expensive, or is it just the same as getting...
It's actually a lot more straightforward than some of the other structures that you might put in place. It can be very simple or it can be very complex. So if you want to become employee-owned under the EOT legislation, you've got to sell at least 51% of your business. We sold 100%, and that made it really straightforward because we didn't have to look at share options or how businesses would sell out shares. But there are some companies that would prefer that their management team would carry shares forward. So it can be a little bit more complex, but it's really flexible. I think that's the joy of it.
Well, bring me into the meeting rooms of Employee Ownership Ireland and the discussions that you would have had. Why is the Republic's government not adopting this?
I think that there is interest. I think the
It's been interest for a while.
There has been, yes.
Now, we off air we were chatting about the co-op movement, where, as far as I know, that was an Irish idea with Horace Plunkett back in the day. We created magnificent co-ops, and lots of things happened to them. So the idea is not alien to us.
I think in some sectors there is a suspicion that by giving tax incentives to people for selling their business, that you somehow or other are rewarding rich people.
It's a fantastic idea, isn't it? It makes no sense. The Department of Finance in the Republic, as far as I know, is somewhat kind of nutty, if I can use that word, about this thing. That they're good, people are getting some huge advantage. It's, as you were correctly saying, it's about keeping businesses in Ireland, growing businesses in Ireland, and growing ordinary people and giving them wealth that they can use. In fact, we're gone pensions mad here at the moment. It's a perfect way of growing a pension.
Yeah, and I think that's correct. And I also think that most people will start looking at employee ownership as an option because of the tax benefit. But you will tend to find that the people who end up doing it, they do it because it's right for their business, not because they were offered a tax benefit. And there are risks for the sellers with selling to an employee ownership trust, because your sale value depends on the future profitability of the company. It's not somebody else coming in and buying you out immediately.
With hard cash.
With hard cash. And for us, the tax benefit did allow us to consider it earlier than we might have considered it, because in theory, we could have stayed in White Ink owning it for another few years, took out profits and paid corporation or paid dividend tax on them. But because the corporation tax benefit was there, we decided to go early, which allowed us to stay in the business for the buyout period and also grow the team without sort of losing out overall.
And growing the team, you just mentioned there, has it helped you to grow? Is it greater visibility? Do people prefer to do business with you because of the structure?
I think it's probably not well enough known, and we definitely talked to all of our clients before we we announced the employee ownership.
And did anybody say, "Oh no, you don't"?
No, we didn't give them a choice, but we did explain to them. One of the real benefits about employee ownership is that from a client-facing point of view and from an operational point of view, the day after you become employee-owned is exactly the same as the day before you become employee-owned. But one of the big advantages that I think for our clients is that every time they're talking to somebody in our practice, they're talking to an owner.
That must be good.
I think that has to be good. That people are thinking about it. Yeah.
Is interested.
Yes.
And if they're not, they shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
At the very beginning there, I was talking to you about Michael Smurfit, and Michael Smurfit said he wouldn't give away equity because it was his blood. Now, you gave away your blood. How did you feel?
Very proud.
Did you? Honestly,
yes.
yeah.
Yes, actually. I think the day that we announced that we were passing white ink on to our employees was during... just towards the end of the sort of COVID, we brought everybody into a big tent, actually, and we had a party. But I think I'm very proud because what it does is secures the legacy of what we've created. White Ink's future is secure in the hands of the people who helped us make it a really great place to work. And that, I think, is fantastic. It could have disappeared. It could have been sold. It could have become part of something else, but its future is assured now. And
in terms of growth, I can't remember, is ARUP, do they have something like 70,000 people or something work? I mean, it's vast.
It's vast, yes. Yeah. ARUP is vast. Yeah. What we've seen since we've become employee-owned, so we've been employee-owned 5 years now, so we've grown about 20%. We had 24 employees when we became employee-owned, now we've got 40. And we've got a studio opened in Edinburgh, and we have sort of started to move into Republic of Ireland doing work, as well as we have a project abroad in Turks and Caicos. So I think it's probably allowed us to be a little bit braver.
Well, that's good. Now, talk to me about your exemplar down here, Wolfgang Digital.
Yes.
I know Alan from years gone by. He used to be on the radio program with me and when I was with Today FM. And they have decided, or he has decided, to give his employees the business.
Yes.
And do you know much about it, or do you? Well,
I know that with Alan that this is very much a belief in employee ownership, because it has actually cost him money as opposed to having saved him money to go down the trust route, because the tax situation in the Republic penalises that.
It's mad,
yes,
isn't
it's
it?
absolute madness.
Yeah. It's cheap. It is actually cheaper to sell to a foreign owner than to grow it yourself.
Yes, I think that's dreadful.
Yeah. So what are you going to do about it?
Well, Employee Ownership Ireland are working very hard to raise the profile of employee ownership. And interestingly, Conor Murphy, when he was Department of the Economy in Northern Ireland, was one of the people who actually pushed forward that they wanted to support Employee Ownership Ireland in terms of grants and helping people consider that as an option. So you have some friends, I suppose, here now. And I do believe that your Taoiseach is in discussions with Graham Nuttall and people to try and bring it forward.
Oh, good. So I didn't know that.
I think there was a meeting in the last sort of 3 to 4 weeks, just in terms of trying to sort of bring things forward. So,
as an old newspaper, not a newspaper, room person, you've just given me my news headline. Thank you very much for that. I was not expecting that. I did not know that. So hopefully something will come of it.
Yes, I mean, the model is proven. We know that it works. We know that it's good for economies, and I think Ireland just has to create a policy environment really to let it take off, because there are so many businesses that it could work for in Ireland, just like there are in Northern Ireland. So we've got 20 now in Northern Ireland.
That's really good. Mm-hmm. And what are the ones that, just briefly, that are the ones that wouldn't work for? What does it not really suit? Well,
the company needs to be profitable, and it needs to see forward profits in order to look at funding the model. Although there are a lot more lending institutions now that will consider lending to pay. Yes, so there are some banks in Northern Ireland, some private equity companies that will lend on that now. It is what is known as cash flow lending, though, rather than, because there's no collateral as such, because there's.
Well, the humans are still there, aren't they?
That's true.
And they're part of what it actually makes a lot of sense, because you're lending against yourself.
Yeah.
And people shouldn't be messing if they own part of the business.
Well, that's true. Yes.
Yeah. You do know, because I told you, and I maybe read your email, that we have a final question.
Yes.
And it is, who would Joan McCoy hire in a heartbeat?
Well, that was very interesting, because as an architectural practice, the temptation is always to name an architect, but I think we've probably got enough architects in the practice. So I'm going to mention a man called Michael Keaveney, who is the Director of Land and Acquisition at a UK company called Grainger PLC. And they are a housing provider in the UK. And why I've picked Michael is...
Because I bet you he's a client of yours.
He's not actually. He is. He's got a very direct style, and I really appreciate his ability to cut through the noise and really get to the crux of the matter. He's very vocal in relation to the cost of social housing. He's very keen on providing housing in the UK, but that the right conversations are being had. And White Ink's purpose that we've all agreed as a team is that everything we do improves lives. And so I really admire somebody who's got such a sort of like a business acumen, but also wants people to be having the right conversations, because if you're not having the right conversations, you're never going to have the right solutions. And Michael is apparently second generation Irish, and he, whilst they do built-to-rent housing, the big conversation in the UK at the minute is all about viability. And he has helped author a report.
Do you mean viability of the UK as an economy? Or are we talking about
everything?
Everything.
But he's been the author of a report called Homes for People We Need. And it's really looking at putting in writing the subsidy that is required for social housing and for affordable housing in the UK, because the conversation is always the wrong conversation. I think if you can understand the money, then you can come up with solutions. But everybody's talking about solutions that don't recognise the scale of the problem. And I just think that's quite a brave thing to do.
Well, as you know from your work here, we have this massive problem where we're meant to be building 65,000 homes a year. We're not doing anything near that. We're half that. Have you got a fantastically brilliant solution?
Well, I think maybe that you could possibly read his report.
I might see if Grainger will come over here and start digging, because everybody's welcome to come in. Yeah.
Housing is a huge problem right across the UK. But yes, I think Michael appears to be a character, and I think that if he was in our business, that he would probably challenge us to think better, and life would definitely not be boring.
And how many, or do you know how many, I mean, are they a large builder? How many units would he build in a year?
Well, they have 9,000 or 10,000 built-to-rent homes, so they're massive. Absolutely huge. Huge.
What a lovely client to have. Michael Keaveney. Somebody wants you. Joan, thanks very much. And thank you very much. You've come down from Belfast to have the chat with us today, and I really, really appreciate that. And if any other companies from NI wants to come down, I love them. I want to hear from everybody on the island. So will you send me down some of your other employee-owned companies? We'll have a chat with them as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Joan. And that is it from this episode of That Great Business Show. And my thanks, as always, to the production team here at Dublin South FM Studios. They are Peter Rice, studio manager, and you like these things. I back reference what I was talking about. The quiet architect of order. And the bench for him this week were Lee Brennan, Richard Ryan, and Neil Horner, all owning their own role in the production. See, I'm trying to make this into ownership. And yeah. Thanks to our long-standing sponsor, De Facto Shaving Oil, for backing independent business thinking. They back us, you back them. DeFactoShave.com. And our gentlemen and ladies agreement is simple. We do the work for you. All you have to do is hit subscribe. Fair exchange, methinks. And just a little reminder, there are 2 brilliant episodes of Ashley McDonald. I think she's hitting 30,000 already just on LinkedIn. And Jane Bothwell is knocking it out still. Lots of people want to talk to Jane and learn about Jane Bothwell. If you're in practice, in fact, Joan, you should get to talk to Jane, because she is... she has 75% of all of the GP practices here, and her business is called GP Ally, and I know that she's going to go into vets practices, and I think she might have even mentioned architects practices. It's going to take a lot of pain away from you. Brilliant woman. Check those ones out. Agus má Jeremy Goni, Gurv Mila Magi, agus Begeisteach agus Slán Tamil.